I never planned to disappear. But when you overhear your wife say, "I settled for less," while she's talking about your marriage to her lover, the same prestigious doctor I've been sending my patients to, well, let's just say my medical training kicked in. They teach us to always have a backup plan, to act swiftly in emergencies, and most importantly, to perform clean amputations when necessary. So I did exactly that. I cut out the cancer in my life with surgical precision, taking 80% of our savings with me. Now my wife gets to learn what settling for less really means, while I'm building a new life she'll never find. But here's the kicker. Sometimes the safe choice turns out to be the most dangerous one of all. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons. Sometimes, these lessons come at a price that seems too high to bear. I'm Dr. Marcus Chun, and this is my story of how I learned that not all that glitters in the medical world is gold. Well, looking back now, I should have seen the signs. They were all there, scattered throughout our 5 years of marriage like breadcrumbs leading to an inevitable truth. But when you're working 60-hour weeks at a community clinic in Boston, trying to make a difference in people's lives, you sometimes miss what's right in front of you. I met Sarah at a medical conference in 2018. She was this brilliant pharmaceutical rep with a smile that could light up any room. Our connection was instant. Both of us shared the same passion for helping people, or at least that's what I thought. We got married within a year, and I honestly believed we were living our own version of a medical fairy tale. The first few years were good. Sure, we had our struggles, her constant traveling for work, my long hours at the clinic, the perpetual juggling of schedules. But we made it work. We had dreams. Big ones. I was building a reputation at Memorial Health Center as a dedicated GP, while Sarah was climbing the corporate ladder at Pharmatech Solutions. Emily Torres, one of our senior nurses, used to tell me I was lucky to have found someone who understood the demands of the medical field. "You two are perfect for each other, Dr. Chun," she'd say during our coffee breaks. If only she knew how wrong she was. The problem started subtly. Sarah began attending more pharmaceutical conferences than usual. She'd come home talking about advances in the field, but mostly about Dr. Richard Morrison, the newly appointed chief of medicine at prestigious Brighton Private Hospital. At first, I thought nothing of it. Morrison was well known in our circles, Harvard-educated, published in top medical journals, the kind of success story they write about in medical school brochures. "You should see how he runs his department, Marcus," Sarah would say, her eyes lighting up in a way they hadn't for me in months. "Everything is state-of-the-art. It's like practicing medicine in the future." I'd smile and nod, proud of my work at the community clinic, helping people who couldn't afford those state-of-the-art facilities. But increasingly, I felt Sarah's disapproval of my career choices. The way she'd sigh when I talked about my patients, how she'd subtly push me to apply for positions at more prestigious hospitals. "We could have so much more," became her constant refrain. I always replied that we had enough: a comfortable home, fulfilling careers, each other. But looking back, I realized she wasn't just talking about material things. Little did I know that on a rainy Tuesday evening in October, my whole world would turn upside down. Sometimes I wonder if I could have prevented what happened next. Maybe if I'd worked fewer hours, or if I'd been more ambitious, or if I'd paid more attention to the warning signs. But then again, maybe some things are just destined to fall apart. That Tuesday changed everything. I remember it was raining, the kind of cold October rain that makes Boston feel more dreary than usual. I just finished a particularly tough shift at the clinic. We'd been understaffed, and I'd had to handle twice my usual patient load. All I wanted was to go home and rest. The argument started over something trivial. Sarah had mentioned wanting to renovate our kitchen, something about needing a more professional space for entertaining. When I reminded her that we were still saving for a down payment on a house, she exploded. "Everything is always about saving with you, Marcus. When are we actually going to start living?" Sarah paced our living room, her pharmaceutical sales presentations scattered across the coffee table. "Dr. Morrison just bought a penthouse in Beacon Hill. Meanwhile, we're stuck in this starter home." I felt my patience wearing thin. "Sarah, we've talked about this. I'm making a difference here. My patients need dash." Your patience. She threw her hands up. "What about what I need? What about what we need? You're so content with this mediocre life." The word mediocre hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent years building my practice, helping people who couldn't afford fancy private hospitals. There was nothing mediocre about that. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys. Emily had warned me just that morning that I seemed stressed, suggesting I take a break. I should have listened to her earlier. I was halfway down the street when I realized I'd forgotten my wallet. The rain had soaked through my jacket, but I couldn't even buy a coffee without it. Frustrated, I turned back. As I approached our house, I noticed Sarah's voice carrying through the partially open window of our home office. She was on the phone, probably with one of her colleagues. I was about to call out when her words stopped me cold. I know, Lisa. Yes, I know. God, sometimes I wonder what I was thinking. Richard is everything Marcus isn't. Ambitious, driven, successful. There was a pause. Of course I care about Marcus. But let's be real. I settled. I could have had so much more. Richard actually sees my potential. I stood there in the rain, each word hitting me like ice water. Richard. Dr. Morrison. The pieces started falling into place. The late meetings, the extra conferences, her sudden interest in Brighton Private Hospital's operations. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Emily asking if I was okay after a tough shift. But I couldn't move, couldn't respond. All I could do was listen as my wife continued to dismantle our marriage, unaware that I was hearing every word. Marcus is a good man, she continued, her voice softening with what I now recognized as pity. But he's not what I need. He's content with his little clinic, while Richard is changing the face of modern medicine. I should have been with someone like him from the start. I backed away from the window, my shoes squeaking slightly on the wet pavement. The rain had turned into a downpour, but I barely noticed. 5 years of marriage, countless shared dreams, all the struggles we'd faced together. It had all meant something very different to her. Without thinking, I found myself walking toward O'Malley's, the small pub near the clinic where the medical staff sometimes gathered after difficult shifts. I needed a drink. I needed to think. Most of all, I needed to figure out what to do with the truth I'd just discovered. O'Malley's was quiet that night. A few regulars nursed their drinks at the bar, while the old TV above played a Red Sox game on mute. I sat in a corner booth, staring at my untouched beer, letting the truth sink in. Emily found me there an hour later. She must have figured out where I'd gone after I didn't respond to her text. One look at my face, and she knew something was wrong. "Want to talk about it?" she asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Emily had been my head nurse for 4 years. She'd seen me through countless difficult cases, but this was different. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "About Sarah and Morrison?" Emily's expression shifted from concern to surprise, then to understanding. "I had suspicions," she admitted. The way she looked at him during hospital functions, how often they seemed to run into each other at conferences. But I hoped I was wrong. I took a long sip of my now-warm beer. She settled for me, Emily. All this time, I thought we were building something together, but I was just convenient. The safe choice. "Marcus," Emily started, but I cut her off. "You know what's funny? I just approved a patient's transfer to Brighton Private yesterday. Guess who's going to be overseeing their care?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been unknowingly sending patients to the man my wife wishes she was with." Emily reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "What are you going to do?" I stared at our joined hands, thinking about all the times Sarah had pulled away from my touch in recent months. "You know what happens when you diagnose a terminal condition, Emily? You have 2 choices: fight a losing battle, or accept reality and plan accordingly. This isn't a medical case, Marcus. This is your life." "No," I said, pulling my hand back. "This is the end of a life I thought I had, and I need to handle it like any other terminal case, with dignity and purpose." I pulled out my phone and started typing. First, an email to Dr. Rodriguez at Boston General. He'd been trying to recruit me for their new community health initiative. Then a message to my real estate agent about the apartment I'd looked at last month, thinking it might make a good investment property. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "Creating an exit strategy," I replied, not looking up. "Sarah wants someone more ambitious." "Fine, but she doesn't get to keep everything we built together while she pursues her real dreams." The next hour was spent making calls, sending emails, and setting things in motion. Emily watched in concern as I methodically dismantled my current life. When she finally left for her night shift, she made me promise to think things through before doing anything drastic. But my mind was made up. If Sarah had settled for less, then it was time to free her from that burden. But I'd do it my way, clean, clinical, and completely final. I spend the next few hours at O'Malley's putting my plan together. Funny how clarity hits you like a ton of bricks when your world falls apart. The old saying, when life gives you lemons, kept running through my head. But this was more like when life serves you a curveball, knock out of the park. My first call was to my bank. Being a doctor taught me one thing: always have a backup plan. I'd maintained a separate account Sarah knew nothing about, mostly savings from my weekend urgent care shifts. Time to put that rainy day fund to good use. You're really going to ghost her? Emily had returned after her shift, still in her scrubs. Just up and bounce. Not ghost exactly, I replied, showing her my laptop screen. More like a carefully planned surgical extraction. I'd already mapped out everything. Resignation letter drafted, apartment secured, finances arranged. All my ducks were in a row. Our joint account had a substantial balance, mostly from my clinic work and those extra shifts I pulled while Sarah was networking at pharmaceutical conferences. Boy, was I naive. I planned to leave her share untouched. Clean break, no strings attached. This is crazy, Marcus. You're usually the one telling patients to sleep on big decisions. I laughed without humor. Yeah, well, the doctor's finally taking his own medicine. Sometimes you need to rip off the Band-Aid. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Working late again. Don't wait up. Sure she was. Probably consulting with Dr. Morrison about some very important pharmaceutical matters. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I opened my laptop again and started liquidating our joint investment portfolio. Sarah had always left the financial planning to me. Too boring, she'd said. Now that seemed like a blessing in disguise. I converted most of my share into easily transferable assets. No paper trail, no loose ends. You know, Emily said, watching me work, I always thought you were too good for her. Too nice, too trusting. But this, she gestured at my laptop, this is some next-level chess moves. When you're dealt a bad hand, you either fold or play to win, I replied, using one of my father's old poker sayings. I'm done folding. The plan was coming together like a well-orchestrated surgery. Each step precise, each move calculated. Sarah thought I was the safe choice, the boring option. Well, she was about to learn that sometimes the quiet ones surprise you the most. Walking into our house that night felt like entering a patient's room after calling time of death. Everything looked the same, but you knew nothing would ever be normal again. Sarah was still out, probably painting the town red with her precious Dr. Morrison. Perfect timing. I moved through the house like a ghost, gathering essential documents, medical licenses, certifications, passport. My diplomas could stay on the wall. They'd just collect dust in my new place anyway. Funny how 6 years of marriage could fit into one duffel bag and a laptop case. Emily had tried to talk me out of it one last time before I left O'Malley's. At least sleep on it, she pleaded. You're not thinking straight. But that was where she was wrong. For the first time in years, my head was crystal clear. Like when you finally diagnose a mysterious illness, all the symptoms suddenly make perfect sense. I packed methodically, the way I'd been taught in med school. Assess, prioritize, execute. A few changes of clothes, important papers, my grandfather's stethoscope. Everything else was just background noise. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Rodriguez at Boston General. Offer letter in your inbox. We need an answer by Friday. Perfect. At least something was going according to plan. I opened my laptop one last time at our kitchen table, the same spot where Sarah and I used to plan our future. Time for the final procedure. First, I transfer my portion of our savings into newly created accounts. I'd done the math. 80% of our savings came from my extra shifts and bonuses. Sarah could keep her pharma sales commissions. I didn't want a dime of that money. Next came the investment accounts. I'd always been the one managing our portfolio. Sarah's eyes would glaze over whenever I mentioned diversification or market trends. Now that financial know-how was coming in handy. I converted my share into easily liquidated assets. No muss, no fuss. Looking around the kitchen one last time, my eyes landed on our wedding photo on the fridge. We looked so young, so full of hope. Sarah was beaming at the camera, while I was looking at her. Story of our marriage. Right there in one snapshot. I took out a piece of paper and wrote. I heard everything. No need to explain or apologize. You won't have to settle anymore. Good luck with Morrison. Marcus. Short and sweet, just like removing a bandage. No point in dragging it out. By dawn, I was ready to pull the trigger on my disappearing act. First stop, the clinic. I knew Sarah wouldn't be up for hours. She always slept in after her late meetings. I arrived at Memorial Health Center just as the morning shift was starting. The familiar smell of disinfectant and coffee hit me as I walked through the doors. This place had been my second home for years. Now it was just another loose and a tie-up. Dr. Chun, Maria, our receptionist, looked surprised to see me. You're not scheduled until this afternoon. Change of plans, I said, heading to my office. Could you hold my calls for an hour? Inside, I fired on my computer one last time. First order of business, an email to HR with my immediate resignation. I cited personal reasons and attached a list of my current patients with recommended transfers. Dr. Williams could handle most of them. He'd been wanting more cases anyway. Next came the tricky part. I opened my patient files and spent 30 minutes writing detailed transfer notes. Each patient, their history, ongoing treatments, specific concerns, everything another doctor would need to know. I might be walking away from my marriage, but I wasn't about to leave my patients high and dry. Emily caught me as I was logging out for the last time. So you're really doing this? She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Already done, I replied, handing her a sealed envelope. Give this to Dr. Rodriguez at Boston General in 2 weeks. It's my acceptance letter. Going to the competition. Huh? That's going to ruffle some feathers. I shrugged, packing my personal medical equipment. Time to stop playing it safe. My next stop was the bank. I'd already moved most funds electronically, but some things needed to be handled in person. The safety deposit box, for one. Wedding ring, birth certificate, backup hard drive, all coming with me. Everything okay, Dr. Chun? The bank manager looked concerned as I closed our joint accounts. Never better, I replied, signing the final forms. Just performing some necessary amputations. By noon, my digital footprint was virtually gone. Email addresses redirected, social media deactivated, phone number changed. I'd even canceled my LinkedIn profile. Let Sarah try to track me through her pharmaceutical network now. The last step was my phone. I picked up a new one with a Boston area code, then dropped my old device in a drawer in my office. Let them ping that location for a while. As I walked out of Memorial Health Center for the last time, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass doors. Same white coat, same ID badge, but everything else had changed. Time to scrub out of this life. Sarah's perspective. The first thing I noticed that morning was the silence. Usually, Marcus would be getting ready for his morning rounds, the sound of coffee brewing and CNN playing in the background. But today, nothing. Marcus, I called out, wrapping my robe around me. No answer. I checked my phone. 9:30 a.m. He should have been to the clinic by now. There was a text from him I'd missed last night while I was with Richard. Working late. Don't wait up. Funny, usually that was my line. Something fell off. His coffee mug wasn't in the sink, his laptop wasn't on the kitchen table, and his medical journals weren't scattered across the counter like usual. The house felt different. Then I saw it. A single piece of paper on the kitchen counter, his neat doctor's handwriting instantly recognizable. I heard everything. No need to explain or apologize. You won't have to settle anymore. Good luck with Morrison. Marcus. My blood ran cold. The phone conversation. He must have come back and, oh God. My hand shaking, I rushed to our bedroom. His closet was half empty, key documents missing from his desk drawer. I grabbed my phone, dialing his number. Straight to voicemail. Panic rising, I called Memorial Health Center. Dr. Chin's office. Maria answered cheerfully. Maria, it's Sarah. Is Marcus there? A pause. Oh, Dr. Chin resigned this morning. Effective immediately. I thought you knew. The room started spinning. I hung up without responding and opened my banking app. Our joint accounts, significantly lighter. Investment portfolio, partially liquidated. Everything was methodically, surgically reduced. My phone buzzed, a text from Richard. Miss you last night. Dinner tonight. I stared at the message, the reality of my situation hitting me like a crash cart to the chest. Marcus, my safe, predictable Marcus, had just pulled the rug out from under my entire life. Racing to the hospital in my car, I tried to think straight. He had to be somewhere. Maybe Emily would know. They always worked closely together. I found her at the nurse's station, doing paperwork. Where is he? I demanded. Emily looked up, her expression unreadable. Who? Don't play dumb. Marcus. Where'd he go? Homesick, she suggested, turning back to her charts. Cut the act, I snapped. He heard me. Talking about Richard. Oh, Emily said, finally meeting my eyes. That conversation. Well, what did you expect? You can't play doctor with someone's heart and not expect flatline. This isn't funny. No, she agreed, her voice cold. It's not. Neither was treating a good man like a backup plan. Sarah's perspective. 3 months after Marcus vanished, I thought I'd finally gotten my life back on track. Richard and I were officially together. No more sneaking around. No more pretending. He took me to all the right parties, introduced me to all the right people. This was the life I'd always wanted. Until it wasn't. Another late night. I asked Richard one evening, watching him pack up his briefcase in his luxurious Brighton private office. Can't be helped, darling. Big merger coming up. He barely looked at me. Don't wait up. Those words, don't wait up. How many times had I said them to Marcus? The differences became more apparent each day. Where Marcus had always made time for dinner together, Richard was constantly networking. Where Marcus had supported my career, Richard expected me to play the role of the perfect doctor's wife. You should consider a position with less travel, he suggested one day. It doesn't look good, you being away so much. I stared at him. My job is important to me. Of course it is, dear. His patronizing tone made my skin crawl. But now that you're with me, you don't need to work so hard. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd accused Marcus of lacking ambition, but he'd never tried to clip my wings. My phone buzzed. Another email from my lawyer. Still no trace of Marcus. The divorce would have to proceed without him. I'd filed the paperwork 2 months ago, thinking it would give me closure. Instead, each document felt like another nail in the coffin of what I'd thrown away. Sarah. Richard's voice snapped me back. The hospital board dinner is tonight. We're something appropriate. I nodded automatically, but my mind was elsewhere. I remembered a night when Marcus and I had grabbed hot dogs from a street vendor after a long shift, laughing as mustard dripped on our scrubs. We'd been happy then. Real. By the way, Richard added, straightening his designer tie, I've arranged for you to transfer to our pharmaceutical division. Can't have my girlfriend working with the competition. The final straw. Your girlfriend working with the competition. I echoed. What happened to changing the face of modern medicine together? He looked genuinely confused. That was just pillow talk, Sarah. You didn't actually think. And there it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. I hadn't traded up. I'd traded real for artificial, substance for surface. Marcus had seen me as a partner. Richard saw me as an accessory. Sarah's perspective. 6 months after Marcus disappeared, my perfectly planned new life was falling apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. The wake-up call came on a Tuesday morning, during one of Brighton Private's board meetings. I sat there in my designer dress, playing the role of Richard's perfect +1, when I overheard 2 nurses whispering behind me. Can you believe Dr. Morrison? 3rd affair this year. My heart stopped. 3rd affair? This year? Poor Sarah. One nurse murmured. She actually thinks she's different from the others. The words hit me like a physical blow. I excused myself and headed to the bathroom, barely making it before the tears started. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The expensive highlights, the carefully curated wardrobe, the perfect makeup, all part of the image Richard wanted me to project. Later that day, I did something I'd been avoiding. I talked to Richard's ex-wife. It wasn't hard to find her. She worked at Mass General. Let me guess, Amanda said, stirring her coffee. He started missing dinner dates? Making excuses about board meetings? Suggesting you change your job to something more suitable? I nodded, feeling sick. Honey, you're living my life from 3 years ago. And Jessica's life before that. And Christine's before her. She gave me a pitying look. Richard doesn't want a partner. He wants a trophy he can upgrade whenever he feels like it. That night, I found myself driving past my old neighborhood. Our old house, Marcus's and mine, had new owners now. Through the window, I could see a family having dinner together. How many meals had Marcus and I shared there, talking about our days, our dreams? I pulled out my phone and opened my photos, scrolling back through the years. Marcus and me at medical conferences, both eager to learn. Us volunteering at free clinics on weekends. Him falling asleep on the couch, surrounded by patient files because he cared so damn much about doing his job right. The contrast with my current life was stark. Richard's idea of giving back was hosting charity galas where he could network. His patient care decisions were based on insurance coverage rather than medical need. And me? I'd become exactly what he wanted, a perfectly dressed accessory who smiled at the right moments and never asked challenging questions. Emily had been right. You know what the difference is between Marcus and Richard? She'd asked me during one of our last conversations. Marcus wanted to help people get better. Richard just wants to help himself get richer. The final straw came when I discovered Richard's calendar on his unlocked tablet. Lunch dates with pharmaceutical reps, dinner meetings with young researchers, even weekend conferences that didn't exist. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Something wrong, darling? He asked, catching me with the tablet. You look upset. How many others are there? I demanded. He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Now, Sarah, don't be dramatic. You knew what this was when you signed up. After all, isn't this how he started? The words hit me like a slap. He was right. This was how he started, with secret meetings and hidden agendas. I'd thrown away a genuine marriage for this hollow imitation of success. I left his office in a daze, memories flooding back. Marcus bringing me soup when I was sick. His genuine excitement when I landed my first big account. The way he looked at me, not as an asset or an accessory, but as a person he loved. That night, I tried one last time to find Marcus. I called Boston General, where rumors said he might have gone. The receptionist was polite but firm. I'm sorry, but we can't disclose employee information. But before she hung up, she said something that gave me hope and broke my heart simultaneously. The doctor you're asking about, he's doing good work here, helping people who really need it. He seems at peace. At peace. Without me. Because I've been too blind to see what I had until I lost it. Sarah's perspective. 1 year after Marcus vanished, I found myself sitting in O'Malley's, the same bar where he'd spent his last night before disappearing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard and I were officially over. The last straw had been finding him with a new pharmaceutical rep in his office. Not that it mattered anymore. I'd already moved out weeks before. Emily was with me, finally willing to share a drink after months of cold shoulders. You know, she said, nursing her beer, he's doing amazing things at Boston General. Their community outreach program has doubled under his leadership. My heart clenched. You've seen him. She nodded slowly. He consults with our clinic sometimes. Never in person, always via teleconference. He's different, stronger, more confident, like he finally knows his worth. I stared into my untouched wine. Not the expensive champagne Richard preferred, just a simple house red that Marcus and I used to share. I really messed up, didn't I? You want the honest truth. Emily leaned forward. You didn't just mess up. You fundamentally misunderstood what settling means. You thought Marcus was settling for less in his career, but he was actually reaching higher, helping people who really needed it, making a real difference. You were the one settling, Sarah, settling for surface success over substance. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, granted in absentia since Marcus never appeared. He'd left me exactly what he'd promised, my freedom to be with my ideal partner. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. My phone buzzed. A news notification about Brighton Private Hospital. Richard was being investigated for insurance fraud and pharmaceutical kickbacks. His perfect reputation was crumbling faster than my marriage had. You know what's funny? I said, finally taking a sip of wine. I used to think Marcus lacked ambition because he cared more about his patients than his bank account. Now I realize he had the greatest ambition of all, to actually make a difference in people's lives. Emily nodded. While you were chasing the dream of being a power couple with Morrison, Marcus was busy saving lives and building something meaningful. He still is, just somewhere else. The weight of my mistakes felt heavier than ever. I'd thrown away a man who loved me, supported me, and wanted to build a real life with me, all for someone who saw me as nothing more than a temporary trophy. I heard he's been dating, Emily added carefully, watching my reaction. One of the pediatric surgeons at Boston General. They're working together on a program for underprivileged children. The news felt like a physical blow, but I had no right to feel hurt. Marcus had moved on, just as I'd wanted, just not in the way I'd expected. You want to know the worst part? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't settle for less with Marcus. I had everything. Real love, genuine partnership, shared values. But I was too blind to see it. I threw away gold for glitter, Emily. And now someone else will get to appreciate what I was too stupid to value. Last week, I'd driven past Boston General, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Instead, I saw the new community health center he'd helped establish. The sign read, "Healthcare for all, because everyone deserves care." That was Marcus, still helping people, still making a difference, just without me. I thought I deserved more than what he could offer, but the truth was, he'd offered everything that really mattered. I just hadn't been wise enough to see it.